This is Jerry Amernick. I'm the author of Babe Ruth, A Superstar's Legacy, now available on Amazon, Amazon.com, in both print and an ebook, and also at the site BabeRuthLegacy.com. Today we're back with the Babe Ruth Legacy interviews, and this one is really special. A few years ago, I spent an afternoon with Julia Ruth Stevens, daughter of Babe Ruth, and the last surviving member of the Ruth household. Julia is 101 years old. When I met her, she was a spry 94 and as sharp as a tack. That afternoon was just after she had gone to Boise, Idaho, to accept Babe's induction into the Sports Humanitarian Hall of Fame. Babe Ruth supported a lot of charities. We spoke that day about the family, her mother Claire, who was Babe's second wife, the 1934 trip of the All-American All-Stars to Japan and the Far East. Julia was on that trip. And also about Lou Gehrig, why Babe never became a manager, his retirement, and the day that he died. We strung clips of that interview together, and here they are.
What did you know as a 7-year-old?
As I grew a little older,
Yeah.
I knew what he was.
Yeah. And were you in awe of him? He was a big man.
Oh, yes.
Well, the first time you met him, do you remember?
No.
No, okay.
No. It just seems to me like he was always there, but...
How do you mean that?
I can't remember when I didn't remember him.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
Okay. So when he came into your life, you're saying he was there, he was a fixture.
Yes, he was. He was so much fun, and he always was bringing me presents. And I remember I had never had a watch, and this must have been by the time I was maybe 8. And he gave me a watch, and I was so thrilled with that watch. Oh, I thought it was just the greatest thing that had ever happened.
Was this a birthday present? Or
No, it was just... And then we started roughhousing, and somehow or another the crystal got broken on the watch.
On the watch, oh.
And I started crying.
Oh, okay.
My goodness alive. Here was my brand new watch, and it was broken, and actually, of course, it was just the crystal, but Daddy said immediately, he said, I'll buy you a new one. I'll buy you a new one. Stop crying. Don't worry. He was always like that. And so, as I say, he was, of course, my family consisted of mother, my grandmother, and my 2 uncles. And me.
Your mother, grandmother, 2 uncles. And what about Dorothy? Was she?
No,
that was
not
later.
at that time.
Okay, and
no.
2 uncles.
Yeah,
and
that was my family.
That was your family. And they were all living together?
Oh, yes,
okay.
Absolutely. We were all born.
Okay. All right. And then when Babe came into your life, did he support the whole family?
To a great extent. I mean, we all lived together.
Right, okay.
But both my uncles had jobs.
Right.
But he definitely supported me and my grandmother, and then Dorothy when she came to live with us. And he knew what he was taking on when he married Mother.
Right. That was 1930. Okay.
1929.
29. Okay.
And he loved it because he had no family.
That's right.
His mother and father separated, and his sister went with her mother.
And his father later was killed in an accident.
Yes, in an accident, and Daddy wound up at St. Mary's Industrial School.
Right.
I hate it when they call it an orphanage.
Yeah, right.
Because it wasn't.
Father, Brother Matthias.
Yes, with Brother.
That's right, Brother Matthias.
Yes, with Brother.
Did you know he was from Canada?
No.
He was apparently initially from Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, so you were a young girl when you first met him. He was very much in your life.
Oh, yes.
What kind of man was he? What kind of person was he?
Very outgoing, very fun-loving, and just a lot of fun to be with. And he was actually highly intelligent, in spite of the fact that he never went beyond the 8th grade, because at St. Mary's, that was as far as they could take them, and then they had to work to support the institution. And so they put him in the tailor shop where he learned to make shirts.
Okay. Now, why do you say he was highly intelligent?
Because where he learned to make shirts.
Okay. Now, why do you say he was highly intelligent?
Because he was tested at Columbia University.
Oh, yeah. What, IQ test?
Yes.
Oh. And when was that?
Oh, gracious goodness, I don't know.
Okay.
Somewhere in the 20s when
Okay.
he was so big.
And you know what his score? I think he's still the most loved athlete America's ever produced. And there's reasons for that. Why do you think that is?
Because he just seemed so loving towards people. Of course, everybody knows that he loved kids.
Yeah.
And, of course, I think that was... and people in general, because I think that was due to the fact that he had grown up with no family to speak of.
Right.
And
They said he was a man in search of his childhood.
that could be.
Yeah.
And so he loved to help poor kids who might need an operation because the family couldn't afford it or something other like that. And those, of course, were the things that he did.
And how did he help? He paid for the operation?
Yes.
Oh, he did?
Yes.
Any memories you have of things
No.
like
But rather like that. And those, of course, were the things that he did.
And how did he help? He paid for the operation?
Yes.
Oh, he did?
Yes.
Any memories you have of things
No.
like
No. But that, of course, was among the many things that they chose him to be a sports humanitarian.
Okay.
It was all the things that he did, and many, many of them without any publicity. So,
Okay.
everything that Daddy did, he did well. He played golf well.
I understand.
He was a good hunter and loved to go fishing, and he always brought home lots of either one when he went, whether he went hunting or fishing or whatever.
Where did he go hunting?
Sometimes I think he went to Canada.
Nova Scotia, I think. Yeah. What,
yeah.
moose he would hunt or
Deer.
Yeah.
Yep, deer.
In the off season.
And he'd bring home. I think he used to go hunting down in North Carolina, and he'd bring home pheasants and other places, wild duck. I never cared for wild duck, but I loved pheasants.
I heard a story, I read this, that when you were living in New York, he'd wake you, now tell me if it's true.
Yes.
He'd wake you up at 5 a.m. and days wake you up at 5 a.m. and days he went hunting, he'd make you breakfast. Tell me about that. I thought that was an interesting story.
He'd crack the door open and say, "You want to have breakfast with me?" And I'd say, "Sure."
5 o'clock.
Yeah. So we went out to the kitchen.
Just the two of you.
Just the two of us. And he'd take a slice of bread and butter it and put a hole in it and put it on the griddle and toast it. And then he'd turn it over and drop an egg into the middle of the toaster, and then we would have fried bologna with it.
This is a Babe Ruth omelet?
Not exactly.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And actually, it made a delicious breakfast. Fried bologna is very good.
And that was the same breakfast?
That was a lot of...
And how often did this happen?
Oh, hard to say. I just remember that it did.
And you were, what, like just a young girl, or how old?
Oh, I'd say probably maybe 14.
Okay. So you didn't mind him waking you up like that?
No, not if it was Daddy.
Okay, all right.
I mean, he was so good. He taught me how to dance. He was a beautiful dancer.
Really? Where did he learn?
Well, I don't know where he learned, but, I think it must have come from his rhythm of his baseball.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
And he was, and I went to boarding school, and of course I was a big girl, and I always did the leading. So when I was about 16, he...
How tall are you?
Right now I'm about 5'2", and of course I was a big girl, and I always did the leading. So when I was about 16, he...
How tall are you?
Right now I'm about 5'5". I
Uh,
used to be about close to 5'6".
okay, all right, go ahead.
And so, of course, going to boarding school, being a big girl at the time, big.
Yeah, okay.
I weighed about 175 to 180 pounds.
Okay.
But I'd say about 2 years later, when I was around 17, he said, let's dance. It was in the summertime when the rugs were up and the floor was bare with just scatter rugs. Well, of course, I started to lead, and he stopped and he said, now look, he said,
And you didn't know how to dance?
and over again. He said, I'm leading you and you follow me.
So he taught you.
So he taught me how to dance. And as a matter of fact, I turned out to be a pretty good dancer as the
And you
years
attribute it
went
to him?
on. Oh, yes, definitely. He taught me how to bowl. And I did pretty well. Of course, he was good. He always bowled over 200. And I was generally down around 143 to 150. Once in a while, I might get up to 160.
So you said, Julia, everything he did well.
Yes.
What other things? Anything you haven't talked about?
You mean besides bowling
Anything.
and golf and hunting and fishing? Well, what else is there?
How do you feel towards the babe?
She loved it. And you could not say a word that was derogatory about Daddy. She didn't spring right up to defend him.
Do you remember any examples, incidents?
Oh, somebody might say that he... He was loud, he was boisterous, and he had no manners or
But
something.
wasn't he loud and boisterous?
Not after Mother.
Oh, she calmed him down.
Oh,
okay. I read a lot about that. Okay.
She was a very good influence on Daddy.
That's I've read a lot about that. And with his money, too, I understand, right?
Yes. And that she said, you're not going to be a baseball player all your life.
And he thought he was. Maybe.
And you have to think about your future. You
Right.
can't spend all your money now.
I heard stories he'd buy a cup of coffee and leave a $100 tip.
Well, maybe 50.
And well, still.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he'd hand a taxi driver a $50 bill for a $2 trip. Yes, he was like that. But after Mother got a hold of him, why, she calmed him down there too. Not that he didn't still tip well.
But
he just did not ludicrously over-tip.
Right.
I mean,
Okay. But a lot of ball players today, they're millionaires and they don't tip anything, right? So.
that I have heard.
Yeah. Okay. What is it? What is it that she saw in him? And what do you think?
I think that really she saw someone.
She saw in him. And what do you think?
I think that really she saw someone who was lonely but didn't realize that he was lonely.
Oh. Okay.
Because he had no family. And that he was very good, very kind-hearted, and I guess she must have thought he was very lovable.
Did you find him that way?
Yeah. Well, one of them was there was one thing about Daddy. If he promised you something, you could depend on it. He would never, ever fail to keep a promise. And he had always promised me that he would be at my graduation.
Mm-hmm.
And the day came.
This is graduation from what, high school?
High school. Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay.
In 1934.
Mm-hmm.
And he was still with the Yankees, and I believe he was in Albany,
Mm-hmm.
playing an exhibition game, which the team used to do.
Okay.
And he flew, which he was not supposed to do. He flew.
Well, why wasn't he supposed to?
Ball players were not allowed to fly in those
days. Okay.
Down to Newark Airport.
Mm-hmm. From Albany?
From Albany.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I don't know whether LaGuardia had been built then or not. But anyway, he got a plane.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting in the front row with the other girls.
Mm-hmm.
And he hadn't come. We'd gone to Newark Dorothy and I had gone to Newark to meet him.
Mm-hmm.
And the plane was late or something, and we had to get back because graduation was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So we went back, and I got dressed and went to school, and we were sitting in the front row,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden I heard this, ooh, ooh. I turned around, and there was Mother and Daddy walking through the door.
She wasn't with. She was there already, Claire?
No, she waited. She came, was there on time, just like he had promised he would be.
Mm-hmm. But you're saying he wasn't supposed to fly?
No.
Okay.
No baseball players were supposed to fly back in those
Okay.
days.
So he contravened team rules to do that.
That's right.
But that was...
Of course, Daddy's name today
Yeah?
is bigger, really, than it was back then.
Tell me about that.
There's hardly a day goes by
Mm-hmm.
that you don't hear his name mentioned in
Mhm.
some way, somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, for example, there's a group of guys in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
I have never met them.
Mm-hmm.
My grandson has a couple of times.
Mhm.
They have a birthday dinner for him every year
On his birthday.
on his birthday,
Right.
February 6th.
Right.
And just to honor him, because they're lovers of baseball, and they think that Daddy was the greatest, and so forth. And it just because they're lovers of baseball, and they think that Daddy was the greatest, and so forth and so on.
Now, you
So
said-
they have this dinner.
Julie, you said his name today is bigger than it was back then. This
I
is
think so.
More than 60 years after his death.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Now that I really couldn't tell you, but it just is. And his signature
Mm-hmm.
is worth more as a single. If you have a ball
Mhm.
with a single Babe Ruth on it,
Mm-hmm.
they have gone for as high as $3,000 and $4,000.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If they're even Lou Gehrig
Mhm.
with the name Lou Gehrig
Right.
brings the price down.
Oh, if it's oh, I see. It's got to be a single
A
signature.
single signature.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you said you don't have one yourself?
No, I don't.
Oh, I see. Why is that?
Well, because who asked his father?
Would have got a...
Who asked his father? Who'd ask your father for a signed baseball? I
Okay.
used to get them for friends
Mhm.
and pictures and things like that. But no, the only signature I ever got was on a check.
Okay. So if you had known back then, you would have got a lot of those baseballs signed, right? Right?
Yeah, it would have been something. The state.
So how long was the trip? How long did that last?
Let me see. We left in October
Mhm.
and we got back in January.
So 3-4 months.
Yeah.
You'd never been outside of the States after you were
I had been to Bermuda
there? Okay, yeah.
and Hawaii, but not outside of the state.
And-
Hawaii was not a state then.
No,
It was.
And had Babe never been outside of North America either?
I think he had been to Canada,
He'd been to Canada. Yeah.
and I'm not sure whether he'd been to Mexico or
Okay,
not.
but not across the ocean.
Oh, he'd been to Cuba.
Been to Cuba. Okay.
Yes,
But of
he had
course,
been to Cuba.
it wasn't like it is today with air travel in those days.
No.
Right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that trip. you left on the Empress of Japan from Vancouver. Is that right?
Yes.
And you went to Yokohama. Just you, the three of you.
Yes.
So hold on a minute. So Dorothy was in school. So was somebody taking care of her?
Oh, my grandmother and my two, like he was a god. Unbelievable.
Tell me about that.
The streets were just absolutely lined with people waving Japanese flags and American flags like it was a parade. And
parade.
all the ball players rode along in these cars. Daddy was in the lead car in what they used to call a touring car.
These were the American League All Stars, or
yes,
Major League, or All American League.
All American All Stars.
Okay.
And when I think back on that, there were so many of them that went into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So we finally got to the Imperial Hotel, which was the only building. It had been designed and overseen by Frank Lloyd Wright.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a building that was left standing intact after their earthquake.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And we stayed there. And it was very, very nice. They couldn't have been nicer. Anything you wanted. But I'll tell you a funny little story.
Tell me.
We were in the room. We had a suite with 2 bedrooms, and came and knocked on the door, and Daddy went to the door, and there was a man standing there in a Japanese kimono. They were still wearing kimonos then. And he said, "Sign ball, please." And Daddy said, "Sure." So he went and got his pen, and he signed the ball. And then this fellow started taking a ball out of those Japanese
and another ball
kimono.
Yeah.
I think Daddy signed about 30 balls.
Oh, that young fellow's probably a millionaire now, right? What was it like after he retired? I know he wanted to be a manager. Tell me about what it was like. Well, he wasn't happy, I guess.
Well, no, he wasn't. He wasn't happy. He did think that some team would offer him the managership because he knew baseball backwards and forwards.
Sure.
And he got along well with the players. And I personally think he deserved the chance. There were plenty of ball players that were made managers.
Yeah, that's right.
That didn't have nearly the knowledge and experience that he did, but nobody ever did. But he played golf. He played lots of times 36 holes a day, 18 in the morning and break for lunch, and then play another 18 in the afternoon. But he played a lot of golf, played in a lot of pro-am tournaments.
Well, let me ask you a question, Julia. Why do you think no one offered him a job?
He played a lot of golf, played in a lot of pro-am tournaments.
Well, let me ask you a question, Julia. Why do you think no one offered him a job?
Well, I have heard newspapers reporters say because the owners felt that he would encourage his players to ask for more money.
Oh, that's an interesting story. Okay. So it could have been collusion among the owners?
Yes.
Do you believe that story?
I think it's highly possible. I won't say that it's a fact.
Because a lot of the players were not well paid.
No, a lot of them were getting $5,000 a year.
Then, okay, now that's a story I've never heard before, but from what I know, it probably makes a lot of sense.
And I do remember when Lou came to Daddy and said, his contract was up, and he was going to see Colonel Rupert, and Daddy said, Lou asked Daddy if he thought he should ask for a raise. And Daddy said, "Good Lord, yes." I can't remember what he was getting. I will just say as an arbitrary...
He asked if he should ask for a raise? You didn't think he thought he shouldn't ask for a raise?
Well, he asked Daddy what he thought he ought to ask us for a raise.
Right.
And I don't know what he was getting, but let's say it was
was probably a good deal for the Yankees.
Probably, I would say somewhere maybe between $15,000 and $18,000.
Mm-hmm.
And Daddy said, yeah. He said, ask him for $40,000.
Mm-hmm.
And Lou said, that much?
Yeah.
And he said, well, he says, you may have to come down a little, but he said, make it difficult for the Colonel.
Is that what he said?
Something like that.
So he was
I
nobody's...
mean, don't hold me to everything.
So in that sense, he was nobody's fool.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And he knew what he was worth as a player, and he got it.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
When a reporter said, gee, babe, you make more money than the president.
That's right. That's a great...
And then he said, yeah, but I had a better year.
Yeah, that's a great quote. It's a terrific quote.
It's not...
About the day that he died. Do you remember that well?
Yes.
Were you in New Hampshire? Or...
No, a friend of Daddy's called and said, your father is not going to last, and I think you should come down to New York.
Mm-hmm.
So I told my husband, I said, I've got to go to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy's dying, and I've got to be there.
And he was 53. He wasn't very old.
No, he wasn't.
Okay, yeah.
And so I went down and joined Mother, and we stayed at a hotel that was very near the hospital.
Just
so
the two of you?
Just the two of us.
Okay. And your mother was, what, in her 40s at the time?
Yes, yes.
So she was a young woman.
Yes, she was.
Well, how was it for her?
Terrible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was just trying to... We would... I know he was there for a while, and I know we went every day, and we'd stay until the doctors always made their rounds at night. And we would stay until the doctors came, and then we would ask, and they'd tell us, there's no change, no change. But we always hoped that, and they did try some experimental things on him, but they didn't work.
Do you remember the last time you saw him? I guess in hospital.
On his... Yes, I do. I do. And, I'll tell you something that he did do when he was in the hospital, which I always thought was absolutely wonderful. If he had a good day when he was sitting up and feeling pretty good, he'd take little visiting cards and sign his name and tell his nurse to take them down and give them to the kids that were always standing below his window, hoping he would come to the window and wave to them.
To take it to the kids, and they were waiting outside the hospital, always.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, when he was feeling up to it.
Yep.
Okay, were there many of them?
Oh yes, they were there every day. Of
Why
course,
do
he
you
didn't feel like doing that every day.
Why do you think kids liked him so much? Because he was a kid himself?
Because he loved them so much.
A lot of people...
Because he loved them so much. I don't think he ever had a chance to be a kid. And he just... and he knew that they loved him, and he loved them back.
He grew up too fast, and a lot of people said he was a kid when he was an adult, though. Right? After he died, tell me how you felt in terms of loss.
Irreparable. Just, I knew that he was gone, and there was never, ever going to be anybody like him in any form or fashion, not as a baseball player, not as a father, and not as a human being. There was just one Babe Ruth, and there would never, ever be another one.